there's a term in politics that I think is generally a bad term or considered a negative term, and it's crossing the floor. It's interesting, there's a term, I really like that we touched so many bases that reminded me of things in my own life and my own journey. There's a term in politics that I think is generally a bad term or considered a negative term, and it's crossing the floor. It's generally considered that you're breaking with your tribe, and some pivotal moment where you're changing your coat to another side and not changing your colors, and it's a bad term. I think I think we should reframe that. I do these story workshops where I ask people 5 simple questions and get them to look at each other and take notes with active listening, paying attention to their body language and what things in their narrative that they think they know about a person are showing up in different ways in their body, and to pay attention to how people feel the words that they're expressing. And there's an interesting study that I think was Malcolm Gladwell popularized when he took these 2 groups of students that had a professor, a series of professors, and they were trying to figure out how efficacious these professors were. So what they did is they took a whole sample student body, and they took that course, and they graded those instructors as you would around effectiveness of communication and all these other things over a whole semester, the entire course. And then, profoundly and amazingly enough, they took an exact identical cross-section of a group of students of the same balance of ages and sex and demographics, and they showed them the same instructions as only 7 minutes of video with no sound whatsoever. And shockingly enough, the results in the data were exactly the same around the students that had taken the entire course over a period of time versus the students that only had 7 minutes of the same instructions with no audio as a video format, right? And I think there's so much that we pick up on each other and read and communicate in ways that we can't even begin to understand. And we need to begin to understand those. We need to pay more attention to that. One of the questions I asked in that workshop is, tell me about your parents and what did they teach you? And I'll try and quickly tell a story about my parents, because they taught me to be courageous and brave and to cross floors. That's where I think that coding in me comes from. Because my dad is from Trinidad and Tobago, and he's a brown, almost black man. And my mother was a light-skinned, blonde-haired, blue-eyed woman from the Pa, Manitoba, who was like the pierogi queen of the Pa. And once you're the pierogi queen of the Pa, there's nowhere to go but down to the big city of Winnipeg, right, to adventure. And so she went to Winnipeg. And back in the 50s, they still have these things called socials in Manitoba, where a bunch of people get together and raise funds for a wedding or a soccer team or whatnot, and they make licensing easy, and they make it easy for the community to gather in a circle and raise something as an economic interest for somebody with a purpose. And they're at this social, and I think it was at St. Mary's College, where my dad was attending. So in those days, there was probably priests and nuns nearby with rulers to measure and make sure that the men and women were dancing an appropriate distance from one another. But it was early on, as my mother and father tell the story, and there was just this great divide across the room, this massive divide. And all the men are on one side of the room, and all the women are on the other side of the room, and there's just this vacuum in the middle, right? This huge vacuum. And my mom, Stella Sokolowski, peers across the room, across that vacuum, and spots in the corner this man. And she looks, she goes, "Did you see that man over there? He looks like chocolate. He's like a brown chocolate man. I've never seen a brown chocolate man before." And she's like, I'm gonna go talk to him. And so my mother had the courage to cross that floor, right across that floor, and hand trembling, extend it to my dad and say, "Hi, my name's Stella Sokolowski, and you're the most interesting chocolate brown man I've ever seen in my life. Would you like to dance?
Oh, wow.
Right? And they got onto that stage and they began the entire party and danced, and the rest is history. And they raised 4 kids, and they moved into a neighborhood in Winnipeg where even the neighbors, at a time before Look Who's Coming to Dinner was an idea on a cocktail napkin, we're still wondering, look at that couple, like, who are those people? Like, that man is black almost, and he's with this woman. When that was breaking, barriers. And so they taught me courage and conviction, and taught me how to look at things differently, and how to be very, very open-minded to perspective. And that's if there's a theme I got from today, is like perspective. And also understanding when to throttle up, right, courageously, and sometimes when to throttle down and do less even. And a last thing I'm going to do, which is usually an eye-opener I do at the beginning of things, is I'm just going to ask everybody, it's perspective, as a simple tool you can use to in other rooms and groups, is just take, everybody, indulge me for a second. Take your hand and point up with your finger to the top, like this, and look at your finger, okay? And I want you to make a circle, like clockwise, right? So make a circle. Your arms up. Now I want you to slowly lower it, slowly, to just above your nose. Keep the circle going. Now keep it at your nose. And now lower it. Keep going. And are we clockwise? We're counterclockwise. We've changed our perspective, right? Right? Completely. Right? You do it again. Everybody doesn't do it again, and they're like, yeah. And so it's very easy to change your perspective and to cross with Lord. And it really depends on how you look at things. So with that said, I'd like to do one last thing, and this will be the kumbaya moment. I'd like the group of here, if you will indulge me, if everybody can stand up here and make a circle out of this room, okay? Just try and make a circle, yeah. And try and connect, so you're just touching it, so we're all either a shoulder or somehow connected with everybody somehow, okay? And I'm going to start, and we're going to go counterclockwise. I'm going to put it like that. And actually, in honor of our dear friend Sam, who we all know.
Yay.
Happy birthday.
And love very much. Wait. Just one word, and we're going to go this way. And I'm going to start. Kind. One word.
Courage.
Committed.
Trust.
Visionary. Mesmerized.
Cool. Authentic. Conviction. Philosophical. Innovative.
Inspiring.
Wise. Grateful. Exploring. Open. Scholarly. High
Honorable.
Caring.
Welcoming.
Happy.
Happy
Happy birthday.
birthday.